Hey everybody, I'm George Affleck and I'm here with Mike Wilson and Emile Scheffel, and we are your team at the Campaign University. And I really want to thank you for joining us today on this live call, this live Facebook show, the big show for this week. I'm really excited about today's subject matter because we got this idea from you in a lot of ways. We did a poll where we asked you we give you three choices. What are the three biggest campaign mistakes we give you three choices and you chose the topic that we're talking about today, which is the biggest mistakes campaigns make. I just want to remind you though, the Campaign University we have a whole bunch of things that we offer, but we have a training course, the election campaign playbook. If you want to check out more about that or ask us about that, feel free to DM any of us or go to the link on the website and check out a big long page of a whole bunch of information about that. It's a comprehensive course that we've created. If you're somebody thinking or about to run for office, or you're part of a campaign team, this comprehensive, Mike's about 80 hours of content we've got on there. We spent a lot of time filling in. There's lots of documents in there, lots of stuff. A really great course. It really will help you plan and strategize for if you're thinking of running. All right, Mike, I'm going to throw it over to you because you're going to lead us on today's call and maybe tell us a bit about how we got to this choice and how well our polled on this one.
Yeah, so we did a poll within the group for this training. So this is what you guys wanted. So we're starting with the three biggest mistakes campaigns make. This is great too. We have a lot of experience. We've seen a lot over all our years and all the campaigns we've been on, and we really agreed on these. And hopefully they'll be helpful to you. We even have some honorable mentions at the end. Feel free to throw in your mistakes as you watch into the comments. Yeah. We also have George talked about the course, but we have a comprehensive checklist we built about everything you need to know that if you're going into a campaign, if you have a campaign upcoming, just type send in the comments. We'll send that to you and you can start to fill it out in your journey to your next campaign and look at the gaps maybe that you need to fill as you prepare yourself for your next campaign. But let's dive straight into this training. We also have an exciting announcement at the end, so hang on because we're going to have a special guest for our next live training. We have a really great guest who's won a lot of elections in Canada coming on to do a training with us. So let's dive right into the three biggest mistakes. Drum roll. All right, so we're going to get right to it. The first one, we're going to count down 3, 2, 1. So the third biggest mistake campaigns make is not talking to the voter. So this is something we just see all the time. We're in meetings like we are on this Zoom call. We're politicos. We're looking at polling and numbers and into the details. But the average person out on the street is so far from the election, barely knowing who's running, especially at the municipal level. But even at the federal and provincial level or state level, they're really far from the issues and the candidates. And their level of knowledge is so far from where you think it is. So you really need to build your campaign around a persona. This is Joe, and he lives in the 905 of Toronto, and he's got 3 kids. He makes $80,000 a year. This is what he cares about. That's who we're talking to, and be laser focused on that in every speech, every ad, every video, every conversation you have, just knowing who you're talking to, rather than getting caught up in the Twitter wars or the back and forth of political conversations. Talking to the voter is the key. What's your experience on that, George?
That's one of the things that you can easily, in a campaign especially, get lost and forget what you're supposed to be doing here. A lot of candidates, in my experience in running for office and running campaigns, they want to hide in the campaign office. They don't want to knock on doors. They don't want to do things. They don't want to actually talk to the voters. So that's really important because you get to hear what people feel out there. And as you say, Mike, if you create that persona, or more, usually it's a couple of personas that you have, where you have the personas, these people that you give names to, and they're all defined and where they live. And then you can connect the messaging of your campaign to that person. And so you should be able to stick to your points when you're talking to people, but because it's also helpful as far as when you're out there and people are saying the opposite of what you want, or you're challenged in a communication strategy and somebody's challenging you, or you're clearly not a voter for you because they don't fit the criteria. But I think the biggest thing that I always found in running for office with some of my fellow candidates was this fear of the voter. I sometimes was curious about why they were running for office if they didn't actually seem to like people. It's a strange concept, but you really got to talk to the voters. You got to get out there. Door knocking being the ultimate way to talk to voters. Get out of the campaign office, get out there and talk to people, talk to your friends. The thing is also you find out, and it's somewhat times a bit depressing because you find out, yeah, as you said, Mike, that a lot of people aren't aware there's even an election happening. How many times in my campaign that I was involved in where on election day, you're out there talking to the voters and they're saying, oh, there's an election on today? And you're like, oh my God. But it's that grassroots. You got to get out there and remind them and tell them about the election, get them out to vote, tell them what you care about, make sure they see you, see your campaign, and just keep that conversation going.
Yeah, and you really need to put the time up front to know from the polling who's won last time, who the swing voters are, so you can develop that persona. And then your whole campaign needs to be disciplined in talking in the language of that persona, persuading that type of person who's just an everyday voter out on the street to vote for you. And you have to be so disciplined in that. So we encourage you, talk to the voter, know who your target is, and develop great messaging around them and talk to them and get out and meet real ones and do that all the time. You want your time to be on that, not on conversations on Twitter or in the campaign room or with politicos. So
you're so right about this. You're so right about the swing voter too, Mike. Just that is like golden, because you don't know where they are. Sometimes you'll know neighborhoods, but if you can convert those swing voters over to you, the only way generally you can do that is through talking to them.
Yeah, and a lot of times the swing voter is the female voter. Men are way more likely to have their mind made up the whole way through. So if that's a suburban mom or a downtown, a young professional woman, you have to build those prototypes and know. And there's men that are also in some swing voting categories that, like I've been on elections where it's trades, educated, making $80,000 a year men that were swinging the vote. So find out who those are and be laser focused on talking to them. All right, number two is one that we see all the time. Yes, and it is a lack of focus on fundraising. So this is deadly because campaigns take so much money to run. And George, what's your experience on seeing this mistake?
I think I'm an unusual ex-politician because I came from more of a salesy kind of side. So for me, fundraising was easy. And in my first campaign that I was part of, I was given free reign to raise my own money and use that money for myself. And so I was like, all right. And so I raised a lot of money and I won my first campaign. I think mostly in part because of the amount of money I had that I was able to use that for advertising. I gave a lot of it to the campaign as well. The key though is you got to ask for the cash. You got to ask for it. You got to have a strategy. You got to have a campaign fundraising person. But I think that one of the things that I find is that a lot of people running for office are afraid to ask. And there is this, I get it, because you're putting your mind quite often into when you're in office and it feels wrong and that there's a conflict of interest that you would be getting, that you put you into situations where you're going to be voting on this issue and I don't want to be asking for money. I get that. But when you're in a campaign, it's different. And there's tricks that you can do as a candidate. You have your campaign manager with you or somebody who's always with you and you're at events or even when you're making calls. You say, you're talking about your stuff, you say, well, we're looking for some money, but hey, here's Mary, and she wants to ask a couple of questions, and let that person go in for the kill on the cash if you're not comfortable. But have that person always at the ready, whether you're calling, say, I'm just going to pass the phone over, and because I want you to talk to Mary, and she's going to talk to you a bit about some of the funds that we need. And then you've pre-sold the person on the funds you need, and then let the other person, if you're not comfortable for the ask, then you can hand that over to the fundraising person.
And how about you, Emile, being in charge of a major political party? What have you seen here with good fundraising candidates and bad fundraising candidates?
Yeah, I don't know how many folks watching have watched the HBO series The Wire, but there's a subplot where the mayoral candidate gets locked in a room for 3 hours every night and he can't come out till he finishes making his fundraising calls. And it's humorous, but I think it sums up that you cannot have a candidate who doesn't play their role in fundraising. The ask from the candidate is the most important ingredient in getting money in the door. It's important to have a team that follows up on that ask and sometimes closes the deal. But for candidates especially, look, the absolute worst thing that can happen if you ask somebody for money is they say no, right? You get to a fast no, you move on to the next person. It's not the end of the world. And that person that said no probably feels guilty, and you can probably talk them into doing something else for the campaign, whether it's knocking on doors or taking us signs or whatever. Last thing you want to do is finish a campaign in debt, having spent more money than you raised. That's one of the absolute worst case scenarios, especially if unfortunately you lose. The other thing is you want to avoid a scenario where you have to make impossible choices in the final stages of the campaign because of a lack of money. If you get to a point where you're a week out, you have a game-changing ad in the can that you want to run that could really close the deal, or you could spend the money over here on getting out the vote. Don't put yourself in the situation where you have to choose between one or the other. Start that fundraising early, have a solid plan, invest the energy into it. You won't regret it.
Totally. Emile, that is such a, that thing where you're just, the race is close. And if you had just a bit more money, you could do it. You're like, oh no.
Yeah. And you know, when you're running for a campaign, just to encourage you, people are passionate about what you're passionate about, and people are voting for you, and rich people are voting for you. And when you have spending limits, they're happy to throw their money behind. You'd be amazed the great conversations you get in, and you make network, and you make lifelong friends, and you can have fundraising events, and it can be a really great thing. But the last thing I'll say on this is you have to be tactical about it. You need to follow up, and you need to have lists, and you need to know who was at your fundraising event, and did they actually give the donation online they said they would. And if they didn't, do you have a volunteer in the office calling them back? Put the effort in to build all those systems. And it could take literally the follow-up process, if you have one in your campaign, could take $50,000 and make it $100,000 just because you were good at following up with people. And it takes money to run ads and do phone calls, which you need for a campaign. All right.
And on the screen there, just on what you see on the screen, Obama close to raising $1 billion. I mean, the game has changed a lot too. Technology has made it really, really amazing. You can tap rich people, but man, oh man, you can really get a lot of people donating. But you still have to have an ask. You still have to, whatever system you're using, you still got to ask for the cash, no matter what it is, whether it's $10 or $1,000. You still have to have a system to ask.
Yeah, very much so. All right, the number one mistake we see, and that can cost you the campaign, is not preparing your messaging or your speeches or yourself or your media responses well enough, and a lack of discipline on messages. So George talked a little bit about changing technology. Probably this is where messaging has been throwing the biggest wrench. We are now in a digital age where the content is coming out at a rapid pace. People are scrolling on their phones. They're not sitting and watching your speech. They're not sitting and watching debates. They're not sitting and watching 30-second television ads either.
Mm-hmm.
So in this rapid fire world, you need to be laser disciplined on your message so people know who you are and what you care about, and that every time they touch you or touch your campaign, they're hearing the exact same thing.
For me, even when I was in office, and the entire time I was elected, I was in opposition. And it was local government, so slightly different, but I only ever stuck to two messages. One was transparency, and the other was budgets, money, the funds of your city. And everything I ever talked about, whether I was campaigning or whether I was in office, always came back to those two things. And it just kept me on point whenever I was being interviewed, and it just made me known for those things. And people really went, well, we need that person, that kind of person there always. And so it makes it easier because if you can pivot a conversation that's going to a place you don't want to go on a subject matter that you don't know about, you pivot over to what you know and are strong about. And in a campaign, if you're, I mean, Emile, you know this better than anybody. When people start straying from your messaging and they're doing interviews, it's like, this is when you're talking about multiple candidates and as a political party, for example. If people stray from the message and they lack that discipline, because of technology and social media, that stuff gets out there, and it doesn't need to. All you have to do, especially if you're part of a larger campaign, is accept the messaging and stick with it, and just find different ways to say it, but say the same things over and over again. I always liken it to a comedian. I don't know if anybody goes to comedy shows, and I've seen many comedians have been involved in boards of being comedy festivals. And one of the things that comedians don't write new material, barely ever. Like they tell the same jokes again and again, and they get better and better and better at them. And they find different ways of saying them that make it work even better. And then they become famous because they're so good at their comedy. It's like politics. Well, sometimes it can be comedic, I guess. It's really about if you stick to your message, your 2 to 3 stories that you have that connect to the messaging and all that stuff, and you have a way of, you just tell those stories again and again and again, and you connect them to and whatever the message of the party is. It just makes your life so much easier, and you don't have to worry about getting yourself in trouble if you're sticking to your message.
Yeah, this is so connected to what we were talking about at the top too, in the first two. First of all, if you know your persona, you know the swing voter, your message talks to that voter. So for instance, Bill Clinton's "It's the economy, stupid" we have here. that was an election where if he could get economic voters, he was going to win. And that's exactly what he did. He talked about the economy the whole time. I think they wrote this in the campaign office as like a joke because they were talking about it so much, but it really turned out to be the slogan of the campaign. And so just that discipline breaks through. And we talked at the top about how far the voters don't even know there's an election going on a lot of the time, or who you are, or they're pigeonholing you into what your campaign is. So only by this discipline will you actually break through to a voter. And that's even more so in the digital age. I see all the time, we have a good ad about the economy on. The economy is the issue of the campaign, but the candidate has a great policy on XYZ that he wants to get out there, which is great. We can put it out. But if you think that ad is tired on the economy, it's in your eyes, it's not yet tired. You still have 2 weeks to go. If you think your economic speech is getting boring, it actually has another month that you need to give it on. So it always feels to the candidate, to the campaign, like, man, we've been talking about this a lot. Like, aren't people sick of it? But that's how it feels inside the campaign. Outside the campaign, it's totally different. And one of the things I've seen as well is your opponents will get totally destroyed by your message discipline. So they're trying all the ways to get you off your strength and get you talking about things that they might be good at or they have a good answer for. And if you just stay on your message discipline, every time your opponent comes at you in a debate or anywhere else, or any reporter question you get, you literally put your opponents in the corner because they're forced to always talk about your message, which gives you such a great winning path. You want to create the ballot question in your campaign, and you create the ballot question by being disciplined and only talking about your message.
So easy, isn't it, Emile? As a campaign manager, so easy to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the bane of most campaigns, right? Is candidates that want to answer every question and dive into every debate and persuade everybody on all of their different opinions. But as Mike alluded to, that Clinton campaign, they drove that economic message constantly. They had what they called a haiku. They were the first campaign haiku, which is like a short Japanese poem. It was change versus more of the same. That's your frame. Don't forget healthcare, because that was a major issue for voters. And it's the economy, stupid. And if you're talking about anything else, then you're probably losing. The definition of success for me on this front is if I'm a volunteer, Mike's the candidate, I go to a door to ask a voter who they're voting for. I say, hey, I'm a volunteer for Mike Wilson. I want them to say, oh, Mike, he's the guy that keeps talking about X, whether that's healthcare, transparency, whatever it is. You want to be the one that's associated with that issue, make sure it's a winning issue, and frame the campaign in those terms. And in the election campaign playbook, our course that we mentioned from time to time, we go deep into how you can do that step by step and make sure that you're fighting that campaign on your terms. And to Mike's point, refusing to let your opponents get a foothold on the issues that they want to be talking about.
So,
Awesome. So there you go. That's the top three. We have some great honorable mentions, but Emile, does any question on these top three come to mind for you, or have you been sent one since we started?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of great comments from members of the group here. One says, Stephen says, candidates who can't make it ask should not be running. Totally agree. You got to be able to figure out how to ask for the things that you need, whether that's a vote or a few dollars. And Zach says, don't focus on the polar coaster. I like that. Don't spending every day like some candidates refreshing.
That is a great one.
See where you're at. Pollsters are there's limitations on what they can tell you. One question that I did get by a direct message here is, you guys talked a lot in the first section about coming up with a persona of your target voters. Wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how you create that persona, because you're obviously not pulling it out of thin air. So how you come up with that archetype of the voter you're trying to speak to.
Sure. Yeah, it's very important. Very important. I would say the most important thing you want to do, you want to know your geography really well. You want to know the demographics there, who's there, how they voted in the past, ages, income, and all that. So you have a really good understanding. And then you want to overlay issue polling. So this is where you get into it's the economy, or we're talking about healthcare. The worst mistake you can make in developing a persona and eventually losing the campaign and having message discipline is to be talking about something that people actually don't care about. So finding that top issue and using it to your advantage is key. You want to win on the issue that the campaign is. So you either need to then make that the campaign issue, or take what is the main issue of the electorate and make it your issue. So there's two ways that you can come at that. But once you have the issue and the people, then you literally develop that person. Okay, he lives here or she lives here. She really cares about this. These are the messages that work for her to vote for me. These are the messages my opponent is telling her about this issue. So I'm going to refute those messages in this manner. And you do this prototype. She looks like this, has this many kids. This is the income. This is where they live. And you put a picture of it on your wall. You go that far and you just remind yourself every day, are we talking to this person? Is our language talking to this person? Is our advertising talking to this person? Are our volunteers, are our phone callers talking to this person? Am I spending my time thinking about this person and not the polar coaster, as Zach said, which I love.
There is that discipline with it. If you're within a political party, if you made it that point where you're the candidate and you're part of a political party, and they often will involve the candidates in this process to really get them engaged. But the personas are developed by the central campaign team generally. And so your job as a candidate within a central campaign is to take that persona and make it your own based on your own personal experiences. So if the topic is housing, how have you personally impacted housing in your business experience or your life experience or with your family, or maybe you've got kids that are living, they're living in basement suites and they can't find, you find those personal stories to connect to the campaign team's persona and key messaging. So that persona and the key messages, the first and the third that we talked about, are very connected. And developing that persona, which as a marketing agency owner, persona development is a big part of what we do right out of the gate, and you stick to it, and it infiltrates everything, and it really makes it easier for the campaign team. Emile, you would know this, especially when you say to somebody, are you sure what you're saying resonates with blank persona name, like Fred or Bob or whatever their name, Mary, whatever, because I don't think it does. Do you? And then they start, it makes the candidate, or even if you're working with a bunch of people and you're saying, and you see somebody straying, you can ask, and it's because you don't want your party to go down, or you say to them, I think you're off base on our persona that we developed here, and I think maybe you should think about that, what you're out there doing. It makes it makes it easier for you to suggest to other people.
Your persona almost becomes like a bit of a moral compass. So when things go off track, when a controversy comes up, you're trying to decide, do we apologize? Do we dismiss it? How much time do we spend talking about it? You get to orient yourself and your team and your candidate by going, okay, what does our persona, what does that target voter want to see us do? Do they care about this issue? If they don't care about it, don't talk about it, move on. If they need to see you make the right decision, think about what that decision is in their eyes and act accordingly. It just helps you pick that North Star and keep yourself heading in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. We call it in the course, making your winning path, where we actually go into how you look at that polling, how you look at the demographics, how you look at the messaging, how you do secondary polling and develop, I need this percent of this persona and 80% of this persona to vote for me. And you literally mathematically figure out your path to victory, and then you go at it. So that's the top three. I'm going to rattle through some honorable mentions, and then we have an exciting announcement. We'll try and wrap up in 5 minutes here. So we couldn't keep it to three. So
there's so many to choose from. So many.
Yeah, we'll find these funny, the honorable mentions, but so disobeying the rules, not seeking clarification. So we're talking about here, if you think you're in a gray area, ask the elections authority in your state or your province or your nation or municipality if it's gray or not, rather than make the mistake and then get penalized for it later. I've learned that from the wrong end of experience. And if your opponents are doing something you think is offside and you get a ruling on it, make sure that ruling is getting applied to your opponents as well. And the next thing that we see is trusting part of your campaign to someone or a company who you think is doing what they're supposed to be doing: advertising, phone calling, polling, volunteer coordination, what you name it, and they're actually not executing there. So a lot of times people will come into a campaign, you'll even hire them, they'll be experts, but make sure they're doing the job. There's good advertisers and bad advertisers. There's good data managers and bad data managers, and there's good volunteer coordinators and bad. Every role, it can be good or bad. So don't just assume what's getting done. What I suggest, and we suggest to cover all this, well, we teach all the roles in the course, but make sure you have actionable data to the phone callers. How many people did we call today? To the ads.
Yeah.
You want to be getting a report on your advertising every day. You want a volunteer report. David Poof, who ran Obama's campaigns, was famous for that. He had this data coming at the central campaign all the time. And then that segues into the next one, not basing your decision on data. It's good to have hunches, but you really want to know where the numbers are. You want to know the persona, how many of them are getting swung or are voting for you, or where you are. You want actionable data coming back from the doors.
I will say though, Mike, because I think that a lot of politicians are intuitive. That's what they're good at. But if you have an intuition about something that you think, okay, this is something that's getting, but go to your team and see what the data looks like. But I think it's a good place. Intuition can be very effective, but don't base your entire decision on that, because you'll waste a lot of time and money on something that's just not resonating with the voters.
Yeah, and you want to put that together. And sometimes you get so fixed on your strategy and it's clearly not working. The polls are, but you got to be able to take that data and say, okay, we were wrong. We got to pivot. There's time to pivot in campaigns.
The beauty, by the way, of digital technology, of course, in digital marketing, is you can test a bunch of stuff and get your own data fairly cheaply. So Mike and I have done this on a couple of campaigns that we worked on, where you test several messaging and then you narrow down to a few key ones. On the communications and the advertising side, you can build your own database through advertising.
And the next honorable mention, neglecting the ground game. So ground game, we're talking about knocking on doors and making phone calls, the basics of retail campaigning. You're never too famous to not do those things. And your campaign needs to go door to door and phone to phone. This next one we see all the time. It is a disaster, especially if you lose, and is ending the campaign with debt. So you might be getting close to the end and you want ads that cost $100,000. You only have 50,000 in the bank and you think, oh, we'll make the next 50. Boom, campaign ends, you lose, you have a $50,000 debt. Nobody wants to give you money after you lose, and it is a disaster trying to raise it, and you're held by the laws that say you have to raise that money. So really, it's very tempting to go for it.
Generally, you can't write a check yourself for that either. You have to still go find that, depending on the fundraising rules. It's complicated if you do that post campaign. Really, even if you win, it's hard, because then you worry about that conflict that you got to ask people for money, and I have won. This is awkward.
Yeah, it's a disaster. And the final one, which we've all seen, is a campaign killer: infighting. Just
the worst.
Just get along with your teammates. You're in a war, face the same direction, fight together. There's nothing worse than infighting. We've all seen it kill parties at the federal, provincial, state, and municipal level over and over again. Avoid infighting at all costs. So those are the honorable mentions. Hope you guys enjoyed today's training. If you want the checklist, which is everything you need to know in the campaign, just type send in the comments. We'll send that over to you. You can start filling out the parts in that you're good at, the parts that you might want to work on more. And of course, we'll be having free content in the group. You can find out about any of the courses or anything at thecampaignuniversity.com.
All right, guys, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today. If you missed this, or you know somebody else who wants to see this, they can join the Facebook group after the fact and spread the word. Anybody you know who's thinking of running, or teams that are thinking of putting campaigns together, they can join and they can watch this recording after we post it up, and as well as we'll be putting up the transcription. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Yeah.